I never thought I'd see the day when the $200,000 deposit from the sale of my dream home would vanish into thin air, stolen by the very people who were supposed to protect our community. But there I was, staring at a letter from the HOA that would change my life forever. Have you ever dealt with an unfair HOA or difficult neighbor? Share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear it. My name is Frank Henderson, retired Navy commander. After 30 years of service, my wife Margaret and I had saved enough to buy our perfect retirement home in the Palms of Naples, a beautiful gated community in Florida. The year was 1998, and at 62 I was ready to enjoy the peaceful life I'd earned. The Palms was everything we'd hoped for. Manicured lawns, pristine pools, and friendly neighbors. We paid our $200,000 deposit without hesitation, as required by the HOA bylaws, and settled into what we thought would be our forever home. The first 2 years were idyllic. Margaret and I spent our mornings by the community pool, afternoons on the golf course, and evenings with new friends at the clubhouse. I even volunteered for the neighborhood watch, using my military background to help keep our community safe. Then Margaret's health took a turn. Her arthritis worsened, and Florida's humidity became unbearable for her joints. Our doctor recommended moving to Arizona's drier climate. It was heartbreaking, but we knew it was necessary. When we notified the HOA of our intention to sell, things took an unexpected turn. "I'm sorry, Frank," said Patricia Winters, the HOA president, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. According to Bylaw 7.4.2, any property sale requires a 90-day community review period. "That's fine," I replied. "We understand the process. What I didn't understand was the nightmare that would follow." The first letter came 2 weeks into our review period. It cited a violation for unapproved landscaping, a rose bush Margaret had planted near our front door. The fine, $5,000, I was confused. "We submitted the landscaping request last year and received approval," I told Patricia when I called her. "Records show no such approval," she said coolly. "The fine stands." The next letter cited our mailbox as non-compliant with community standards. Another $3,000 fine. Then came violations for our patio furniture, the color of our front door, even the type of sprinkler heads in our irrigation system. Each violation carried exorbitant fines, all deducted from our $200,000 deposit. I've lived here for 2 years without a single violation, I argued at the next HOA meeting. Suddenly, as we're trying to sell, you're finding problems everywhere. Patricia adjusted her pearl necklace. "We've recently implemented stricter enforcement, Frank. It's nothing personal, but it was personal, and it was about to get much worse." The final blow came 3 months into our review period. The HOA board declared our property non-compliant with multiple bylaws and seized our entire $200,000 deposit to cover the fines and remediation costs. Margaret was devastated. "That money was supposed to help us buy our new home in Arizona," she said, tears streaming down her face. "What are we going to do now?" I held her close, my mind racing. In the Navy, I'd learned that when faced with an injustice, you don't get mad, you get strategic. What would you have done in my place, fight back or walk away? I decided to fight, but first I needed to understand what I was up against. I started by requesting copies of all HOA meeting minutes from the past 5 years. Patricia was reluctant. "Those are confidential records," she insisted. "Florida statute. 23 says otherwise," I countered, citing the state's HOA laws. "I have a right to those documents." She reluctantly provided them, but only after charging me a hefty processing fee that she deducted from what remained of our deposit. As I pored over the minutes, a pattern emerged. At least 6 other families had tried to sell their homes in the past 3 years. Each had been hit with numerous violations and fines. Each had lost a significant portion of their deposit. I had no idea the next letter in my mailbox would change everything. It was from a man named George Peterson. He'd heard about my situation from a mutual friend. The same thing happened to us, he wrote. Patricia and the board took $150,000 from our deposit. We tried to fight them, but ran out of money for lawyers. George wasn't alone. I eventually connected with 11 other former residents who had similar stories. The HOA was systematically targeting homeowners who wanted to sell, using obscure bylaws to justify fines that drained their deposits. Armed with this information, I hired a lawyer, Thomas Reynolds, a former prosecutor who had a reputation for taking on corrupt HOAs. This is worse than I thought, Tom said after reviewing my evidence. They're not just enforcing rules unfairly, they're running a racket. The lawsuit we filed was straightforward. We demanded the return of our $200,000 deposit plus damages. But Patricia and the HOA board weren't worried. These frivolous lawsuits happen all the time, Patricia told the local newspaper. Our bylaws are clear, and we followed them to the letter. For 6 months we battled in court. The HOA hired an expensive law firm that filed motion after motion, trying to delay the proceedings. Each delay cost us money and time. Then came a glimmer of hope. Patricia approached me after a hearing. "Frank, maybe we can work something out," she said, her tone suddenly conciliatory. "The board is willing to return half your deposit if you drop the lawsuit." It seemed like a breakthrough. Margaret and I discussed it, and while we wanted all our money, half was better than nothing. We agreed to the settlement, but the next day Patricia reneged. "The board has reconsidered," she announced coldly. "Our offer is off the table." The betrayal was crushing, but it also revealed something important. Patricia was scared. And scared. People make mistakes. Tom and I discovered that Patricia had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, luxury vacations, home renovations, even a new car. We also found that the HOA's bylaws had been amended illegally, without proper notice to homeowners. With this new evidence, we amended our lawsuit to include fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified about our experience, as did George Peterson and 3 other former residents. Patricia and the HOA board members all took the stand, each claiming they had acted in the best interests of the community. Their lawyer was aggressive. "Commander Henderson is simply bitter about losing his deposit," he argued. "He's trying to drag the HOA through the mud out of spite." But Tom was prepared. He presented document after document showing the pattern of targeting sellers, the illegal bylaw amendments, and Patricia's misuse of funds. The turning point came when Patricia was cross-examined. Under oath, she admitted that the HOA had never before enforced most of the violations they had cited against us. So these rules were only enforced when someone tried to sell their property, Tom asked. "That's not accurate," Patricia insisted, but her composure was cracking. "Then why," Tom continued, "do the HOA's own records show that 87% of all fines in the past 3 years were levied against homeowners who had listed their properties for sale?" Patricia had no answer. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, took the matter under consideration. We waited 2 weeks for her decision. When the day finally came, Margaret and I sat nervously in the courtroom. Patricia and the HOA board members were there too, looking confident. The judge began by outlining the facts of the case. Her voice was measured, giving no indication of which way she was leaning. Then came the ruling. The court finds that the HOA, under the direction of President Patricia Winters, engaged in a systematic pattern of fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, the judge announced. The bylaws were enforced selectively and punitively against homeowners attempting to sell their properties with the apparent intent of wrongfully withholding their deposits. Patricia's face went pale. The court further finds that Patricia Winters personally benefited from these actions through the misuse of HOA funds. The judge paused, looking directly at Patricia. The court orders the HOA to return Commander Henderson's $200,000 deposit, plus an additional $300,000 in damages. Additionally, as Patricia Winters was found to have personally profited from these illegal activities, the court orders that her property within the Palms of Naples be transferred to Commander Henderson as further compensation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The courtroom was silent. Patricia stood up, her face red with fury. "You can't do this. This is my home." The judge banged her gavel. "Sit down, Ms. Winters. You should have considered the consequences when you decided to steal from hard-working homeowners." 2 months later, the transfer was complete. Margaret and I now owned Patricia's former home, a beautiful property overlooking the golf course, worth nearly twice what our original deposit had been. We decided to stay in Naples after all. Margaret's doctor agreed that the stress of moving might be worse than the humidity, and with our new home's central air and dehumidifier system, she was much more comfortable. As for Patricia, she was forced to move to a small apartment across town. The remaining HOA board members, faced with multiple lawsuits from other homeowners, resigned. A new board was elected, with George Peterson as president. The first thing the new board did was return all wrongfully withheld deposits to the former homeowners who had been victimized. I often see Patricia around town. She avoids eye contact, but I don't harbor any ill will toward her. In the end, she buried herself in her own arrogance. Life in the Palms is peaceful again. Margaret and I spend our days enjoying the community we fought to save. Sometimes new residents ask me about the house, the one everyone knows as the house that justice built. I tell them the story, not with bitterness, but with the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the system works, sometimes justice prevails. What's the sweetest justice you've ever seen? Share your stories in the comments below.